You're listening to the Chopped Podcast, episode number 27. Let's do this! Hey everyone, I'm Marley of the blog Namely Marley. Thanks for joining me today for the 27th episode of the Chopped Podcast. This is the podcast designed for people just like you, bloggers who love food. Each week, I'm sharing interviews, thoughts, stories, everything related to food blogging so that we can all learn together about what works with food blogging and a little bit about what doesn't. Today's guest is Gaby Dalkin of the site What's Gaby Cooking. Gaby and I are talking about recipe development. You see, Gaby is a professionally trained chef, and she travels the world as part of her career, searching for international cuisine that she can then turn into delicious but easy recipes that she shares on her site. Doesn't that sound like a dream job? I think it just goes to show what an inspirational field we're in. There are so many ways to make a living as a food blogger. In fact, I recently wrote a post on the top 3 revenue models for food bloggers. So go check that out. But regardless of the model of revenue you're focusing on, you probably share some form of recipe on your site. So knowing how to do that right is important. Do you guys know that game, 6 Degrees of Separation with Kevin Bacon? If you don't, the game is that you can pick any actor involved with the Hollywood film industry, and they can be linked back to the actor Kevin Bacon within 6 steps. I feel like I'm playing 6 Degrees of Separation with Matt Armendaris because it seems like everybody I talk to lately either knows Matt or they've attended one of his photography workshops or they want to. Gaby is no exception because Matt is Gaby's food photographer. And that's another thing I love about Gaby. She's not shy to say that she hires out her food photography and her social media sharing. Sometimes I think as food bloggers, it's like we have this do-it-ourselves syndrome, and I put myself in that category, so I get it. And sometimes, when we're bootstrapping, that's exactly what you do when you're starting out your business. You have to do everything yourself. But I think the goal should be to work hard to find the place where you can hire some of this stuff out so that you free up some of that creative energy towards becoming the CEO of your food blog. So what was I talking about? Oh yeah, Matt Armendaris. Guess who's not only speaking at Chopped Conference, but also running a food photography workshop the day before Chopped Conference? Matt Armendaris, that's right. You will be so inspired by Matt and his creative process and his passion for food and for people who love food like us. So buy your ticket today for Chopped Conference on October 15th through the 16th. You can learn more about it by going to choppedcon.com today. So let's go straight to that interview. Today's intro shout out is to Nori Cornelius, who reached out to me on Instagram and said she was listening to the Chopped podcast while chopping salad. We here at Chopped love chopping. So bravo, Nori. So what are you doing while listening to the Chopped podcast? Send me a shout out on Twitter or Instagram using #ChoppedCon, and maybe I'll feature you and your site in an upcoming episode. But for today, in honor of Nori, everybody get out your Boston bib and your veggies, clean off your cutting boards, get out those earbuds, and let's talk about all things food blogging and so much more. Hey everyone, I'm really excited to have Gaby Dalkin of the site What's Gaby Cooking on the show today. Gaby, welcome to the Chopped Podcast.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
Yay. I am really looking forward to talking with you today because we're going to be talking about recipe development and just all kinds of food stuff in general. But first, let's take a step back, and I want to ask you about why you started your site.
Yeah. So I started What's Gaby Cooking about 5 years ago. I had just graduated college, and I had like this awful job that I did not like, and I was so bored. And I really loved to cook, and that was kind of my way of like dealing with this awful job. And so I started the blog, and actually a couple weeks later, the company I was working at basically folded. So I didn't have a job, and I went to culinary school. So the blog kind of started with school, and I blogged my way through the program and all the things I was cooking and making, and it just started from there.
Don't you love those things in life where it just feels like the planets align and this is what you're supposed to do?
Yeah, like I had no intention of ever I had no idea I could even turn What's Gaby Cooking into a lucrative career back then. Like it was totally just a passion project just to start.
And then you had the opportunity to really invest in it by going to culinary school.
Exactly. And it was so awesome to like learn the science behind cooking and really get comfortable in the kitchen. I mean, I grew up watching the Food Network. Rachel Ray, I thought was like my best friend. I was already pretty comfortable in the kitchen, but just going to culinary school and feeling really comfortable, mixed, just like knowing flavor profiles and the science behind baking and all that definitely has helped. It's helped me in my life and my line of work.
And a fascination with knives. Do you have that?
Yeah, I definitely do. I mean, when I first went, my godmother actually is a food blogger. She writes The Italian Dish. She got me my first really fancy knife when I went to culinary school, and it was really exciting.
That is really exciting. I've taken the it's like a plant-based pro course that I took with an online Ruby, and it was very thorough, and how to chop and how to do all these things, and I really feel a lot more, I don't know, comfortable in the kitchen as a result.
Yeah, I think knife skills are such an incredible thing. I mean, I feel like they should teach it to you in high school. It's just something everybody should know.
It is so smart. Like, just simple things like how to even wash them or how to sharpen them. All those things are so important.
Exactly. And it prevents people from like cutting themselves later. Like,
yes, exactly.
Avocado can be hard. Like, people should be educated on how to do that.
Yeah, it's so true. Yeah. Well, we could talk about knives all day, but let's go on. Okay. So what's your favorite part about food blogging so far?
Oh my gosh, it had for sure the people I've met. I mean, my best friend is Matt Armandaris, and we met through food blogging. I met him at Blog Her Food. I don't know, the first one back in San Francisco, like 5 billion years ago. And he's like my best friend. He was the best man in my wedding. Like, wow. We have such an incredible relationship, and I've met so many other incredible people through food blogging. I think that's definitely, hands down, without a doubt, my favorite part.
Now, had you already graduated from culinary school by the time you went to that first Blog Her Food?
No, yes, I had. I had graduated like 2 days before, wow. And then I went to Blog Her Food.
Wow, that is so cool.
Yeah, it was kind of crazy. I think I was like delusional the first day because culinary school graduation was like a week of cooking for like 18 hours a day. So I was like kind of delusional.
Yeah. Well, so here's the thing is like, I hear this answer a lot when I ask people what they like about food blogging. A lot of people will say the connections they made with other food bloggers. And so is that a testament to getting away from your computer and out of your kitchen to conferences or places where you can meet other food bloggers?
Yeah, I think it's really important to get out and meet people in the real world. I mean, I know I had formed all these relationships with people online, and then we met in real life, and it was so exciting, and you felt like you already knew them. And I also think the food blogging world is just full of like really awesome people, like people who love to eat and people who love to cook and entertain and feed people are generally really awesome people.
Oh, that is so true because they really get the importance of that, I don't know, like that connection with people, and it's just facilitated when food is involved, I think.
100%.
Yeah. Okay, so is there anything about food blogging that you don't like so much?
Oh my God, the dishes?
Oh, you mean like washing them?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I hate that part.
Dishes to do all the time.
Yeah.
I mean, no, I don't think so. I mean, I really love my career. I think as it evolves, it becomes a lot. There's so many more parts of blogging now that didn't exist 5 years ago. Now there's like Instagram and Snapchat and all these other Pinterest and like things you have to spend hours on every day and really like cultivate your voice and all that kind of stuff. I think it's gotten to be, a little bit more. There's just more going on nowadays.
It almost feels like busy work at times compared to the creative process of making recipes and things like that.
100%, which is why it's really awesome to have assistants and interns.
Definitely recommend cultivating a team. In fact, I was going to ask you about that because I believe Matt does your photography, doesn't he?
Yeah, so I did all the photography for my website for 4 years, and then it got to be to a point where I could afford to bring on a team. So Matt does all the photography. Adam, his husband, does all the food styling. So I basically develop all the recipes and test them and cross-test them here in my kitchen. and with my cross testers. And then I go down to the studio every couple weeks and we shoot a bunch at a time. So I always have, things on deck to post.
Well, what I love about that is I think sometimes if I were to stereotype the average food blogger, there is this tendency to want to do everything ourselves. Mm-hmm. And as you mentioned, the list of things that we do grows, it seems like it's a great idea to try to find, develop a team that can do things for you.
Oh my gosh, 100%. I mean, I think I wouldn't be able to do and work with the amount of clients I do and do like extra things without my team. Like my team, they're incredible. And I mean, Matt and Adam are a huge part of it, and they've really helped me develop the What's Gaby Cooking style and what the aesthetic is, and like all that kind of stuff. And then my other assistants are like instrumental in the day-to-day functioning of my site.
Oh, that's great. So giving up ownership of some of those things, I think it just frees you up to be even more creative and to hone your skills even more.
Yeah, it does. And I was a major type A, so it's really hard for me to relinquish. But
I know. Yeah, me
once
too.
I learned how to do it, it's made my life so much better. And I can actually, focus on the creativity behind it rather than like submitting my website to Taste Spotting and Food Golfer and, things like that.
Yeah, I can empathize with you because just the beginning of this year, my husband is a photographer, and so we decided to. He's now doing the photography. I do the styling, and we're working on it together. It's a very together process. But he's actually the one snapping the shots and doing the post processing, and I love it. It was a hard thing for me to give up, but I love it.
Oh my God, that's so fun though. How fun that you get to do that with your husband.
I know. It's really cool. And now we kind of, when we start talking about recipes, we're already talking about how what kind of mood should we set for the styling. And I don't know.
Which is so smart. And I'm sure we'll get into that later with recipe development, but it's so important to visualize it before you develop a recipe.
Okay. So that's a great segue. One of the main reasons I asked you to join me today is because of that culinary background. I thought you could talk about something that's on the minds of a lot of food bloggers, which is recipe development.
Yeah, let's do it.
Yeah, let's do it. So can you talk about what this process looks like for you? And I say that with this big caveat, and that is I realize that the process for developing a recipe for something like guacamole with 5 fresh ingredients would be really different than, some brownies. But I'm just curious if you've noticed a trend and overall what your process looks like.
Yeah, I really cultivated and developed my process while I was doing my cookbook a couple years ago because I am the owner of so many cookbooks and I make recipes and not a lot of times. Like a handful of times, which is more frequent than it should, the recipes don't work. And so I was really aware of that when I was recipe testing my cookbook. So all the recipes in my book were whether it was a guacamole or like an avocado brownie or whatever, they were all tested at least 5 times. And I don't test the recipes for my website that much. I do a minimum of 3 times now, unless it's like a baking dish or something really complicated. Mm-hmm. But everything's tested at least 3 times. And most of the times it's 3 times by me and then 1 time by someone else before it gets to the studio. And yeah, I just think it's important to like try things with different stoves and a gas stove and electric stove and different ovens, things like that, because everyone's kitchens are so different. There's always going to be room for error, but I like to try and, put my best foot forward when it comes to recipes.
I see what you're saying, because so in other words, if you do it twice and someone else does it once, it gives you the opportunity to hear from someone else's perspective on what troubleshooting that they're going through. Yeah,
exactly. And maybe my oven's wrong, like that. Maybe it's like having a malfunctioning day, or it's just having a whatever. You never know.
Yeah, that for someone who may be just putting recipes on their site and hadn't thought about the concept of testing a recipe, I'm sure that can sound overwhelming, but I think after you get into the groove of it, it starts to not be so difficult to do.
Yeah, and it's also important, like the reason this started, like before I even published my cookbook, I got paid like $100 once to do a recipe, and I was like so pumped. This was back in the day. I was still private chefing. So it was just like extra spending money, and I was so excited. And I submitted the recipe, and it called for, it was just like a chicken dish, and it was supposed to be 1 teaspoon of salt, but I had a spelling error and I said 1 tablespoon of salt.
Oh no.
And it was for a client. Like, it was only $100, but it was a paying client nonetheless. And I was so embarrassed that I was just like, this can never happen again.
Yes. Those are oftentimes those moments that change us, I think.
Oh my gosh. It was literally, I felt like my whole world was crashing in on me when I got the email, and they're like, are you sure about this? And I'm like, nope.
That's called a typo, people.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah. But I mean, imagine if someone had made that and they would have like that. They're like wasting all their money on the ingredients and their time in the kitchen. Like that I would never want someone to feel like that.
Yeah, especially something like salt that you can't, it's hard to really fix that one.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, and I find, like, I don't know if you do this as well. I'm just curious if you have any tools that help you with recipe development. Like, I have a notebook I keep in my kitchen, and sometimes I spend a lot of time even just thinking about the recipe before. I mean, like, I write it down and I think through the steps, and I wonder if there's a process like that you use.
Yeah, I actually do something really similar. I have notebooks laying all over my home that I jot notes down when something comes to mind. I actually write a lot of my recipes out before I even get into the kitchen, and then I refine them as I'm cooking them 2 or 3 or 4 times. Just because I've written now like over 2,000 recipes, so I kind of I know right. Like the steps and the processes and like what I like, how hot the pan should be. So I kind of like try and word it in my mind and on the paper before I even get into the kitchen. So I can be efficient.
Yeah. And sometimes that starts to feel like the first step at the recipe, you know what I mean? Like your first take at it is the writing it down and really thinking it through.
Yeah, and that way you can kind of see like, oh, you know, this is going to come out and it's just going to be like all brown. Like I need to make like a really pretty salad or something to put on top, or some sort of garnish that's going to make this like really pop off the page on Pinterest or Instagram or whatever it is. Sometimes just being able to write it down helps me to see that.
I love what you mentioned earlier about the photography and how that, you know, kind of works into the recipe development. In your notes, do you ever say something like, hey, this would look good with a blue checkered cloth or something like that?
Yeah, I mean, I don't, the styling, I like the prop styling, I leave up to Matt and Adam most of the times, but I definitely keep in mind the food styling before I finish recipe. Like if something's not colorful, I probably won't even test it. I'll just drop it. Like I just want my food to be colorful. So I kind of think about that, and I think about ways to incorporate color and keep it really California, like a California vibe and things like that.
Well, there's sometimes you can add a pop of color, right? Like by chopping some parsley and putting on the top and things like that. Oh,
for sure. 100%. Yeah. I mean, sometimes things are just going to be brown, like cookies are going to be brown. Yeah. There's no shame in that. But like if I'm doing, I don't know, we have a hard, when we're in the studio and we're struggling on like how to shoot something, more times than not, it's because it's like just not, there's no like cool garnish on it, or it's just kind of boring recipe. So.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit about actually the recipe writing. I have the book by Diane Jacob called Will Write for Food. Okay. She says the best recipes are not only clearly written, but also include the personality of the writer. Do you agree, or is there ways that you can include your personality in a recipe?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I think that's why people read our blog. They want to feel like they're in the kitchen with us, and they know then when they come to What's Gaby Cooking that I'm not going to be like, preheat the oven to 425 degrees and then add 1 pan and like, yes. I'm going to talk
very
like
sterile.
Okay, throw a pan on the stove, heat it over high heat. You know, I'm writing the recipe how I would talk to someone. When something is like really intricate, like I will use proper words in English like I was taught in culinary school, but I think it's really fun to read a recipe and I'm like, oh my God, that feels like I'm literally in her kitchen and she's telling me what to do.
I like that because you're right. Some things you know, there's just only one way to say chop this or, you know, dice that. And there are a lot of ways that you can explain some of the steps that you're taking in a way that just kind of gets your personality, like you're talking to a friend almost.
Yeah, like instead of saying, and garnish with a dollop of garnish with some chopped basil. You can say throw some chopped basil on top and you're good to go, or something, something that just kind of weaves in a little bit more of your personality, whether it's casual or silly or, whatever.
Yeah, don't be afraid of that. Just be yourself. That's good.
For sure.
Can we talk a little bit about attribution? I know this is a hot topic for a lot of bloggers, but there are some recipes like my mom has passed down to me. Maybe it's her favorite potato salad or whatever. Are there some other recipes that just pop into your head as you're going along in a day and you decide to give it a try? Those are things I think that would probably not require any attribution. Whereas if I get inspired by seeing a different recipe that I modify, I would want to give attribution to the original recipe. Do you have any clarification on that?
100, I agree. And I think it's better. My motto is like, it's just better to be safe than sorry. I've had people take recipes from my site and like they style it and shoot it the way we styled and shoot it, and they don't give any credit. And I'm like, you posted this 3 weeks after me. Like clearly you saw it somewhere, and that's fine that you were inspired by it. Like, I'm happy my cooking or anyone's cooking is inspiring other people to get into the kitchen, but like, it doesn't hurt to just be like, I saw this on What's Gaby Cooking or Pioneer Woman or whoever you're reading and say like, I thought it was such an incredible idea. Here's my spin on it. Like, that doesn't hurt anyone. That doesn't take anything away from your recipe. It's good practice.
External links are good for SEO too, so it does help you in other ways.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, if you link to someone, maybe they're going to go back to your site and be like, oh my gosh, well, she made this casserole and it looks so cool. Like, I'm going to make this and give her some love back that way. And,
Very good. So I think that's good for people to hear from someone like you, especially that it doesn't take away from your culinary skills for you to attribute that you first learned about this recipe from so-and-so and you were inspired to modify it.
Yeah. And here's the thing. There are only so many ways to make mac and cheese. Like there's no one's reinventing the wheel on that one. Like, you're just kind of like twisting and turning things to make it fit your needs. It's okay to say you were inspired by the original recipe somewhere else. Like, I can guarantee you mac and cheese has been made every way it's possibly going to be made.
Yeah. I mean, the same could be said for like the chocolate chip cookie. I mean, it really is. It's maybe has a half teaspoon of baking soda or a whole or whatever, but it's
yeah, or chocolate chips or chocolate chunks, like whatever. It's chocolate.
Yeah. That's right. And so, giving attribution to the people who helped inspire you is always a good thing.
Yeah, I think it's great. I mean, and you know what? You would do that in any other line of work also. Like, people, like, I don't know, when we used to write essays in school, you had a bibliography. Like, it's
right. Or, if you're playing a song, you're in a band, you would say, hey, this is the Beatles song or whatever. This is based off of
exactly.
Yesterday or whatever. And I think it's just common practice to do that in lots of different industries. So why not in this one?
Yeah.
Cool. Okay, so let's talk about ingredient lists and your recipes. I mean, this is kind of getting down to the brass tacks of how you list a recipe on your site. Mm-hmm. Do you have any advice for bloggers on how to list ingredients for their recipes?
Yeah, I think this is what we were taught in culinary school, and this is what we did for my cookbook, and it was, same story coming from multiple people in my life. All the ingredients should be listed in the order they are used. So if you're making a shrimp tostada, but you don't cook the shrimp until last, like, it doesn't need to be the first thing in your recipe. The tortilla should be there with the oil that you're about to fry it in. And then, if you're following the directions, that's the order that you should list the ingredients in.
I see. So it's almost like a movie. The characters are listed in the order that they appear.
Yeah. That way, when you're reading the recipe, like for me, like, I can put my finger at the top of the ingredients and read the recipe and make sure that I'm covering everything, and I'm not just like jumping around like a crazy person.
Yeah, I think that make it logical for easy for the people to do that, to follow the recipe. I love that. And
the recipe has like multiple parts to it. Like, a lot of my recipes are like, let's say it's a salad and a vinaigrette, and they're like two separate parts of the recipe. I like call it out. I say like, here's the ingredients for the salad, XYZ, and then I do a little indent or whatever it is in my recipe index. Like, here are the recipes for the vinaigrette, XYZ, blah 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 blah. So people stay like on track.
Love that. Love that. An alternative would be is if you have that vinaigrette as a separate recipe and then you just link to it as the bottom ingredient. But
Oh yeah.
otherwise, I agree. It should be a subheading. That's cool.
Yeah, but if you can link to it, I vote linking to it because that's an extra hit to your site.
Yeah, that's right. More internal links are good too. Yeah. So I always get flummoxed about whether you should say 1 potato washed and chopped versus 1 cup of chopped potatoes because, there could be a difference in the size of potatoes.
Yeah, I think for something like that, I would say 1 cup of chopped potatoes. But if it's something like, I'm trying to think of an example. Yeah, I think it's better to kind of give people the actual amount of things going in because you could buy a potato that's 2 pounds and I could buy a potato that's 1.5 pounds and then we're getting totally different yields.
Yes. Especially if on some recipes, I can imagine I think there's some things that are standard. Like if you're using eggs in a recipe, then I think the standard is probably a large egg.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But I'm trying to think of some other examples. I don't know. I just think it's better to err on the side of, caution. So telling people exactly how much that potato should measure before it goes in is a great way to do it. Also, I don't know. Some people like to give things in weight. I know it's not as common in America. It's more common in Europe, but it's a good secondary way to put something to put in your recipe if you want to.
Oh, I see. If you're using something like produce that has a weight to it, like a potato, then you could say a 1.5 pound potato chopped.
Yeah, 1 cup of chopped potatoes should be about 1.5 pounds, whatever it is. I totally made that up. I don't know how much.
I love it.
Okay. But you know what I mean?
Yes.
Just people something to back it up with if they want to measure it another way.
Bananas would be another good example because a lot of recipes will call for a banana. You may say a large banana, but it's really kind of hard for someone to gauge that. But you could also say a typical banana is about a 1/2 cup, so you can go from there.
Exactly.
Perfect. Okay, good. What about the double list? I mean, if a recipe calls for a cup of sugar in the cookie dough and then 2 tablespoons of sugar to roll the cookies in, do you list those 2 separately?
I don't. I list them all together. So I would say 1 cup and 2 tablespoons of sugar, divided.
Okay.
And in the recipe, I would be, because, you're and add the sugar. And then there I would say, and, add 1 cup of sugar, reserving the other 2 tablespoons for a later use, just because sometimes, myself included, people get a little lazy when they're reading and they read so quickly they think they know what they're doing and then they get to the bottom and they're like, oh my god, I shouldn't have put all that sugar in.
That's me. I'm raising my hand.
I mean,
I'm terrible at that.
I just think I know what I'm doing, so then I don't pay attention and I'm like, oh, that was really dumb, Gaby.
That's too good. So let's talk about the steps in a recipe, like the directions or method that, a blogger would share. For example, should you err on the side of giving a lot of feedback and directions or try to keep those steps kind of minimal?
I think it depends how your relationship is with your audience. I mean, I assume that my audience has cooked before, but if you're I also write recipes that are really approachable and easy. There's nothing complicated. So if you're doing something complicated, I would for sure err on the side of giving a lot of directions. Like if you're teaching people a technique, I would be pretty verbose in my description. And I would even maybe find a cool YouTube video or something to help illustrate my point and link to that. Because otherwise, if this has happened before, I'll wake up in the morning and look on my website and I have 18 comments about how to roll this specific crazy kind of Swedish cinnamon roll, and I'm I should have been more descriptive in the description. But if you're telling people how to cut an avocado and make guacamole, then I'm I figure they know how to do that by now.
That's a really good point. And the example I can give is I did a cheesecake and I cooked it in a bath and I found a video where they talked about how you do that. It was a YouTube video, so that was really cool. And
people really appreciate stuff like that. I mean, if I had the time, I would make those videos myself.
Yeah.
To give people that information. But, if you can find someone who's showing a technique, it's great to show people real step-by-step directions.
I agree. So I have this funny quote from George Carlin, and I love it. And he says, here's what he says. This is a complaint of mine. Too much use of this prefix, pre. It's all over the language now. Pre this, pre that. And he talks about placing a turkey in a preheated oven. He says, it's ridiculous. There are only two states an oven can possibly exist in, heated or unheated. I love that quote. And ever since then, it's like, I can't bring myself to say preheat your oven.
Oh my God, that's really funny.
Isn't it? I know.
I never thought about that. It's just what we're so accustomed to.
Yeah, exactly. So I always, in my instructions, say heat your oven, but I feel so weird because most people do say preheat.
I say preheat, but I never even thought about it until right now.
I know. I mean, it makes sense. There is no preheat function on your oven.
No, there certainly isn't. But I mean, I also think it's one of those things that,
yeah,
like totes is not a real word,
right.
But we use it now.
Yeah, exactly. And I actually read up on this a little bit because I was kind of curious about it, why it got started in the first place. And it sounded like a lot of times original recipes way back in the day, like this is, I think, early 1900s or whatever, they didn't include instructions for heating up the oven. They just assumed that the person would scan down the recipe and say, oh, yeah, it requires the oven, so I'm going to turn that on. But then they would get to that point in the recipe and not have the oven on. So,
oh, yeah, I think that's totally true. I have some of my grandmother's recipes, and it doesn't even make mention of how hot the oven is or how long you bake things. It was just like a guesstimate.
Oh, my gosh. So recipes have definitely got more descriptive, over the years then.
Yeah, thank goodness. Otherwise, we'd be wasting money on ingredients and like ending up with a burnt cheesecake.
Yeah, which takes me to another follow-up question, which is, how do you handle all the questions that you get? I mean, as a food blogger, we're going to get a lot of questions about substitutions or questions about our recipes. I'm just curious if you have advice on that.
Yeah, I'm really honest with people about things like that. Like, I think I've been doing this now for 5 years. People know that my recipes are not going to be gluten-free if they're baking. And I'm not an expert on that, so I can't speak to it. So I'll just say, if someone's like, oh, like I'm allergic to X, Y, and Z, can I substitute it with this? I'll say, like, you're more than welcome to try. I haven't tested it like that. Like, that's not the way we developed the recipe. If it's something like replacing milk with almond milk, I'm like, I can tell them, like, I don't foresee that being a problem. But if they're trying to, like, create their own flour mixture instead of all-purpose flour, then, be my guest, but, like, and let me know what happens. But, like, I can't tell you if that's going to work or not.
Oh, yeah, that is just a great way to handle that. Honestly, I think it's important for people to own their own allergies, too,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I mean, I would never want to give someone bad advice. Yeah. Like I don't know the first thing about gluten-free baking. Like I would feel terrible if I told someone something and it wasn't right.
Yeah, exactly. I totally agree. So any other things about recipe development that you think should be on the minds of food bloggers?
Oh, man.
I know that's an open-ended question. That's mean.
I know. Not that I can think of right now. I mean, I think the art of recipe development is really awesome. It opens up a lot of doors for people. So I think it's definitely something to take seriously.
Well, that actually was a question I was going to ask you. Is it more art or science, recipe development?
I think it really depends. I mean, if it's baking, I think it's more science. I was in pastry school and it's so scientific. I hated it. Like I dropped out. It was just way too scientific for me. And it like brought me back to days of being pre-med in college. And I was like, this is not going to work.
Yeah.
But I think, the art of cooking is really creative. Like mixing different flavors and creating new flavor profiles is for sure an artistic thing to do.
But there is a science to how you get that down and on paper and share it with people. I think that's maybe, the art of communicating or art of creating and then the science of getting that down on paper. Yeah,
I think that's a good point. I mean, I think I never even thought about it like that, but I think it might be because I've been doing it's just natural to me, right. People, doctors, like they just operate. Like that's what they know what to do. I mean, it's hard. It's funny to like think about that from a different perspective.
Right, exactly. But that's the thing that will help make your recipe accessible to other people is their ability to look at your instructions and be able to follow it.
For sure.
And that's another question I had for you is accessibility, because, a lot of times we might be developing recipes and have a long list of ingredients or a lot, exotic ingredients. I mean, do you have any tips on making sure your recipes are accessible?
Yeah, I mean, I do a lot of travel for my blog, and I like go to different places, and I am like paid to come back and then write recipes inspired by those. And a
Hmm.
lot of times they call for ingredients that are not available at your like local Whole Foods or Safeway or whatever. So if you're calling for an ingredient like harissa or something that someone couldn't easily find at their local grocery store, I always link to it on Amazon or some sort of specialty retailer so they can find it and easily order it. If people don't want to spend the money on that, I'll suggest a substitution. I think that's really important when you have such a long list of ingredients to really make sure that people know where to get them and like what it actually is.
I love that. So, in other words, you could actually even add a note that says, if you can't find this, you can substitute it with this. But, you might even want to point out that you think that this exotic ingredient is kind of key to the success of the recipe.
Yeah, and I do that all the time. So, I mean, there's things that I have all these recipes that were inspired by my trips to Brazil, and there are definitely ingredients in there that you can't find everywhere. And people substitute it, and I'm sure they're fine, but like you're never going to get that same flavor if you don't order whatever it is on Amazon or wherever you're ordering from.
So when you travel, do you taste the culinary traditions and try to create your own recipes from that?
Yeah, absolutely. I just got back from a trip to Brazil, and it was specifically for, food. So we were traveling all over the country and trying different cuisines from different chefs, and I like took all that inspiration, and we're testing a bunch of recipes in the kitchen right now that'll show up on the blog in the next couple weeks.
Wow.
So
So that
yeah,
was like an exploratory trip for you to try different recipes?
yeah. I mean, I don't know if explore. Yeah, I guess so. I mean, it was through a brand. Like they took us down to cover the location, and part of my coverage will include writing recipes inspired by the trip because that's the number one thing people are coming to my site for are recipes.
I'm so embarrassed to admit that I've been to Brazil because I was at an age where I was not into experimenting on food, and I hardly tried anything. I'm embarrassed to admit that, but
Oh my gosh, you don't have to be embarrassed to admit that. I was the pickiest eater until I went to culinary school. Like I need to redo all of my childhood travel. Like I went to Turkey and I think I
I've
ate
been to
like
Turkey.
the
Yeah.
entire time. Like how embarrassing. Now I like love Turkish food. So I'm like, who was I? Like I was such a bratty little 15-year-old when I was there. I didn't want to try anything.
Yeah, that's how I feel. I feel like, I'm almost like a brat when you will stand there. I was in Greece and refused to try black olives because I thought they looked disgusting. Are you crazy?
Well, it's just an excuse to go back now. So there
That's
you go.
true. Hey, I like that plan. That's a good plan.
Everything. If I can make a trip out of it, any excuse works for me.
That's good. And that leads me to another question, which is like, do you ever experience droughts in your recipe development? Do you ever feel like I don't know what to fix next?
Yeah, absolutely. And I feel like the way to fix that for me is to get out of the kitchen. Like I need to go out to eat and I need to travel and like hop in the car and go on a road trip and just like do something outside of the kitchen because
Yeah.
I feel like when I'm in the kitchen too frequently, if I've been testing for like 8 days in a row, I'm like, get me out. Like I can't even read anymore. And then words start looking funny and the word salt looks like it's misspelled. Like it's just, sometimes you just have to get out of the kitchen.
Yeah, and turn that food blogger in your head off. Like sometimes just cook for the joy of it.
Yeah, I mean, that is real. And eating for the joy of it. Like
Oh,
sometimes I
yes.
eat and I don't take pictures and I'm like, this is such a luxury. Although I must admit it's getting to be fewer and fewer because now I have like a serious Snapchat addiction. So I Snapchat everything. And so
I follow you on Snapchat. I love your travel videos. It's great.
thank you. Our Peru trip was so much fun.
Yes.
We were really silly.
In a very fun way, though.
Yeah, we have a good time. We keep things interesting, that's for sure.
It sounds like a dream job because you get to cook, you're traveling, you're eating. It sounds great.
Yeah, it is really awesome, but like a lot of people like I just got home from Peru and Sweden and Denmark, and people are like, "Oh my God, you must have had the best vacation." And I'm like, it looked like a vacation, and I made it sound like a vacation, but it's a lot of work and it's
Yeah.
exhausting. So it's not like I'm not living like this playground life.
Yes.
But I certainly try and make it look like that.
On the days, oh, you do it quite well. On the days when maybe the rest of us would be traveling and want to spend the evening in the hotel room because we're just tired from traveling, you have to get out and do these things. I'm sure it must be hard.
Yeah, it's a lot. Like we got to Peru, I don't remember what night it was. It was like the first night or the second night. And I mean, we flew down first class. Like it was so luxe. Like we had
Yeah.
a great time, but we got there and we were so tired. And they're like, all right, dinner number one's up. And it was a 30-course dinner.
Oh my gosh.
And it was just like so incredible. It was like the number one restaurant in all of South America. But at the end of it, I was like, again, I was like completely delusional. Like I didn't know, someone who was doing that for fun, you could really relax and enjoy the experience. But we're sitting there like dissecting all the food and talking about how this could inspire a recipe and like
Yeah.
talking to the chefs and the wine guys. Like it's not, it's a little bit, it's not vacation.
You're on.
Yeah, you are always on.
Yeah. And one thing I found about international dining, it's quite a different experience than in the United States. I mean, they really want you to stay. It feels to me
Yeah.
like,
It is an experience. They're
Yeah.
not trying to hustle you in and out within 90 minutes.
Exactly. United States, you kind of feel like you've got a number on your head. They're looking for, they're looking to move you on.
Right, yeah.
And like when I was in Argentina, they wouldn't even bring the check unless you asked for it.
Yeah, it's crazy. And I mean, in Argentina, dinners are like 5 hours long and you're
Yes.
expected to polish off like at least 3 bottles of wine. Like, these are requirements.
Exactly. And then you have to get up the next morning and go back to work, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. What's coming up next for you? Anything that you can share?
Oh my gosh, what's coming up next? Well, we are working on some exciting video, maybe TV projects. They're all in development right now, so there's nothing really like concrete to share. And the blog's doing great. I think we're going to work on some new extensions of that in the near future. I don't know if I'll do another cookbook in anytime soon. Maybe like an app or something fun like that. I don't know. We'll see. I'm heading back out on the road in a couple weeks and going to Germany and Austria for some more food trip, so that'll be exciting.
That is exciting. I love following your trips. I'll leave the link to your Snapchat page because if you want to, follow along and see some of the great travels and the food that you're eating, it's wonderful.
Thank you.
Okay, so a few quick and fun questions here at the end of our interview. What's the one food item you can't live without?
Guacamole.
Oh, my daughter and I like to say this poem. Guacamole, you touch of my soul. I eat you in a bowlie.
It is my lifeline.
It is good stuff.
Good.
Yeah, that's cool. So do you have a favorite way that you make it? Do you chop tomatoes or any special ingredients?
Yeah, one of my favorite recipe is on my site, and it's avocado, lemon juice, lime juice, chives, red onion, and then salt and pepper. And it's just really simple, but the lemon and the lime juice are everything.
And the chives.
Yeah, I like chives better than cilantro and guacamole for some reason. I don't know why, but I just think they're really good.
I'm going to have to try that because my husband's not a big cilantro fan, so maybe the chives.
Does it taste like soap to him?
I think, yeah, he can eat a little bit of it, but he doesn't like it a lot.
Yeah. My friends sometimes say they don't like cilantro, but I just ignore them and I cook with it anyways.
More guacamole for me is what I'd say.
Yeah. Well, and a lot of times they don't even realize it's in the food. Like I think sometimes people just say they don't like things. I mean, I was guilty of this as a child. I said I was allergic to seafood until I was 20. Just because I didn't want to eat it.
That's too good. That was your way of getting out of eating it?
Yeah. Well, my mom is a vegetarian, so we never grew up eating seafood or beef or anything.
Yeah.
So I didn't want to eat it when I was out. And so I would just say, oh, no, I'm allergic.
And then nobody even tries to push it. That's really good.
Nobody questioned me, but now I'm like such a seafood fanatic. Like, I love seafood.
Has your mom disowned you?
No, but she doesn't know where I come from because like no one in my family really likes to cook. But they all They all love it when I come to visit because they're like, oh, Gaby's here. Like, we could go out to all these incredible restaurants in Seattle, but we're just going to have her cook.
So you never get a vacation.
No, not unless I'm not cooking tonight. We are going out.
Yeah.
But it's also like I never get to cook for my mom and my dad because I don't live in the same city for them. So it's really special for me when I'm home to get to do that.
It is a real treat to cook for people, I think. I agree.
For sure.
What's the favorite app on your phone?
Oh my God. Well, I mean, Snapchat or Instagram. But but if it's not Snapchat or Instagram, it's this app called To Do, and it's TEUXDEUX, and it's a to-do list because, like I said earlier, I'm like kind of super type A control freak, so you can like cross things off and uncross them off with the touch of your finger, and it's so much fun.
So it's like a game out of your to-do list, huh?
Yeah, it kind of. And then at the end of the day, if you don't finish something, it carries over till tomorrow. Or it like makes it look like you have a really clean day that you finished, and you feel really accomplished that you're like, oh my God, look at everything I did today.
I love that. But actually, because sometimes I will reach the end of the day and I think, I just feel terrible about this day. And then when I look at my list, I think, oh, wait, I got several things done that I needed to.
You need to do. It's going to change your life.
Okay, I'm going to get it. And I'll leave the link for everybody so they can get it too.
It's free. It's totally, I think it's free. Well, no, actually, I lied. I think it's like $10 a year, but whatever.
Whatever. $10 a year, that's a pretty cheap tool to have.
A really cheap tool to have to make yourself feel good every night before you go to bed.
Yes, and we all need that.
A little positive affirmation. Didn't hurt anyone.
Exactly. Do you have any time for TV at all? And if so, what's your favorite show?
Oh my gosh, I make time for TV. That is like the only time I can turn my brain off.
Yeah.
My favorite show, that is, I don't have children, but it's like asking me to pick my favorite child. Oh, so hard. Well, right now I'm obsessing over True Detective because my boyfriend, Tim Riggins / Taylor Kitsch is in it. And my husband thinks I'm crazy because I love him, but he's so cute.
That's
so
great.
I love that. But I also watch everything on Bravo. I'm obsessed with The Bachelorette. I watch Game of Thrones is like my lifeline. I watch a lot of TV.
That's good. That's good. And like you say, it's an escape. You gotta have those moments where you just, turn everything off.
Yeah, like being a blogger, I feel like we're on all the time. Like from when you wake up, you're thinking about recipes, and when you're at a restaurant, you're talking to chefs and you're networking and blah, blah, blah. So like it's really nice to just like watch Bravo TV and watch Andy Cohen talk about the housewives and be like, oh my God, I can literally not think about anything because this takes no brain cells.
Whatsoever. Yeah. I love it. Coffee or tea?
Another hard question. I like a mocha. I only started drinking coffee 6 months ago, so I can only drink a mocha because it has chocolate and almond milk.
I'm with you. I'm a tea drinker all the way, and I don't even like coffee, but yeah.
Yeah. It's just like the art of like having a coffee with someone is so much fun, but I drink tea every morning.
Yeah. Okay, good. So I'm going to put you in the tea category then.
Yeah. No caffeine for Gaby. I get crazy with caffeine.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It would be scary, I think.
Yeah. Like I already have enough energy. There's no need to put more like stimulants in my body.
Watch out. Yeah. How can people find you online?
So whatsgabycooking.com is my website, and all of my handles are listed on the top right-hand corner of that.
Excellent. Gaby, thanks so much for taking the time to talk with me today.
Oh my gosh, thank you. This was so much fun.
I had a blast.
Me too. Have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thanks to Gaby Dalkin for being my guest on today's episode of the Chopped Podcast. If you were out running around and couldn't write down something important, don't worry, we took the notes for you. Just head on over to choppedcon.com where I put up links for each show, including the stuff we talked about today and more information about our guests. I hope you're loving the Chopped Podcast. If so, it would mean the world to me if you'd head over to iTunes or Stitcher and give it a review. You can do that right now. Also, you can spread the word about the Chopped Podcast using @ChoppedCon on Twitter or Instagram, or even Facebook. Your shout-outs really mean a lot. You inspire me, so I hope today's show is helpful and inspirational to you as well. Thanks so much for listening, and have a great week.